From Faraday, Louisiana, Jerry Lee Lewis. Peace in the Valley. Here is Elvis Presley.
Let's turn him loose. Ladies and gentlemen, Chuck Berry, Sweet Little 16.
For millions of viewers, Ed Sullivan was the man who brought the biggest stars into their living rooms. His show helped launch careers and turned performers into legends overnight. But behind the polite introductions and applause, not every star left a good impression. In fact, some of the biggest names in music reportedly rubbed him the wrong way. From clashes over attitude to creative differences, these stories reveal a surprising side of television history. And the 7 music legends Ed Sullivan simply couldn't stand. Join us in this video as we reveal the details. Number 7. Mae West. When Mae West stepped onto the stage of The Ed Sullivan Show in April 1959, it didn't look like a scandal waiting to happen. There was no shouting, no rebellion, no broken rules, at least not on paper. But what unfolded that night was something far more subtle, and in many ways, far more unsettling for Ed Sullivan. It wasn't a clash of noise or chaos. It was a quiet battle between two completely different worlds. On one side stood Sullivan, the careful gatekeeper of American television. He believed in order, discipline, and a kind of polished image that families could trust. In his mind, Sunday night TV was almost sacred, a place where grandparents, parents, and children could sit together without discomfort. On the other side was Mae West, a woman who had built her entire career on bending those very boundaries. By 1959, America still held tightly to traditional values, especially on television. What appeared on screen had to be clean, proper, and safe for all ages. But Mae West came from a different era of entertainment. She was bold, confident, and famous for turning simple lines into something far more suggestive with just a look, a pause, or a shift in tone. Sullivan knew exactly what he was risking by inviting her. On one hand, she was guaranteed to draw attention. People were curious. They wanted to see what she would do. On the other hand, she carried a reputation that could easily clash with the show's carefully maintained image. It was a gamble. To stay in control, Sullivan and the network went over her script in detail. Every line was checked, cleaned, and approved. Anything that could be seen as inappropriate was removed. By the time they were done, the script looked harmless, safe enough for even the most conservative viewers. But there was one thing they couldn't edit: Mae West herself. That night, she walked onto the stage dressed in a sparkling gown, her signature fur draped over her shoulders. Even at 65, she carried herself with a confidence that immediately filled the room. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Every step, every movement was deliberate. The audience responded instantly, some excited, others unsure of what might happen next. On paper, the segment was simple: a light interview, a bit of playful conversation about her latest work, nothing risky. But the moment she began to speak, everything changed. Her voice, slow, smooth, and full of intention, gave every word a different meaning. Simple phrases didn't sound simple anymore. A casual comment could suddenly feel loaded, depending on how she delivered it. A glance, a smile, a slight pause, they all added layers that weren't written in the script. What had been approved as harmless suddenly felt different. In the studio, the atmosphere shifted. Some audience members laughed nervously. Others looked away, unsure how to react. It wasn't explicit, but it wasn't entirely innocent either. Mae West had found a way to stay within the rules while completely reshaping them. Backstage, Sullivan watched it all unfold, and there was nothing he could do. She hadn't broken a single rule. Not one line had been changed. There was no technical reason to cut the segment. But the effect she was having, through tone, body language, and presence, was something no script could control. To Sullivan, it felt like he was losing control of his own stage. What he had intended to be a safe, polished segment now felt unpredictable, uncomfortable, as if the tone of the entire show had shifted in a way he couldn't correct. When the segment finally ended and Mae West stepped off stage, there was no public outburst, no confrontation, just a decision. Quiet, firm, and final. Sullivan reportedly made it clear to his team that she would not be invited back. It wasn't about breaking rules. It was about something deeper. Mae West had shown that control on television didn't just come from words. It came from presence, from delivery, from personality. And that kind of influence couldn't be easily managed. For Sullivan, that was a risk he wasn't willing to take again. So while she walked away from the stage with her reputation intact, the door to one of America's biggest platforms quietly closed behind her, for good. So, who else is on Ed Sullivan's hate list? Keep watching to find out. Number 6. Bo Diddley. On November 20th, 1955, the American music world found itself at a turning point. And right at the center of it all was Ed Sullivan's studio. What happened that night wasn't just a performance, it was a clash. A moment where old rules met a new, unstoppable force. And the man who brought that force to life was Bo Diddley. To understand how explosive this moment really was, you have to picture America in 1955. Rock and roll was still brand new, loud, unpredictable, and seen by many as a threat, especially to traditional conservative audiences. Sullivan, always sharp when it came to staying relevant, knew he needed this new sound on his show, but he wanted it controlled, polished, safe enough for families watching at home. So when he invited Bo Diddley, a rising R&B artist with a raw sound and a unique style, he already had a plan in mind. During rehearsals, Sullivan made it clear that he didn't want Bo performing his hit song Bo Diddley. The rhythm was too wild, the energy too untamed. Instead, he instructed him to perform 16 Tons, a calm and widely accepted song made famous by Tennessee Ernie Ford. To Sullivan, this was the perfect solution. Take something bold and unfamiliar and reshape it into something audiences would feel comfortable with. In a way, it was about control, presenting something new, but only within limits he approved. Bo seemed to agree. At least, that's what Sullivan believed. But live television has a way of rewriting plans. Just before Bo stepped onto the stage, a backstage crew member held up a cue card with the performer's name written in big letters. Bo Diddley. It was meant as a simple signal, but under the hot lights, in the rush of the moment, Bo saw it and either misunderstood or chose to. When he walked out onto the stage, there was no 16 Tons. Instead, America heard something completely different. The sharp, buzzing sound of his electric guitar cut through the air. The rhythm rolled like thunder. It wasn't calm, it wasn't safe. It was raw, powerful, and alive. Bo didn't just stand there and perform, he moved, danced, and played with a fearless energy that demanded attention. Backstage, the reaction was immediate. Sullivan watched in disbelief, then anger, then something deeper, loss of control. This wasn't just the wrong song. To him, it felt like a direct challenge. The carefully planned image he wanted to present had been thrown aside, replaced with something he hadn't approved. Bo Diddley wasn't following the script, he was rewriting it. And in doing so, he brought something real to millions of viewers, unfiltered, unapologetic, and impossible to ignore. When the performance ended, the audience erupted. Young viewers loved it. It felt exciting, different, and real in a way television rarely allowed at the time. But backstage, it was a completely different scene. Bo walked off the stage feeling like he had just delivered something special. But waiting for him in the hallway was Sullivan himself, tense, furious, and ready to confront him. According to accounts from the time, Sullivan didn't hold back. He saw this as a personal insult, not a misunderstanding. Pointing directly at Bo, he reportedly unleashed his anger, calling him out for stepping out of line. There was no praise, no acknowledgement of the crowd's reaction, only frustration from a man who felt his authority had been challenged in front of millions. "You will never appear on this show again as long as I live," Sullivan declared, and he meant it. Bo Diddley was never invited back to the Ed Sullivan Show. The next music legend on the list brought a strong energy to Ed Sullivan's show. But what was the reason for Ed hating him? Stay tuned to find out. Number 5. Jerry Lee Lewis. When Jerry Lee Lewis stormed onto the stage of the Ed Sullivan Show in 1957, he brought with him a kind of energy that felt almost out of control. His pounding piano, wild movements, and explosive performances made it clear he wasn't just another singer, he was a force. At first, Ed Sullivan fully embraced that energy. Featuring Lewis on his show was a strong vote of confidence, a sign that he believed Lewis was destined for greatness. But everything changed in less than a year, and it happened fast. During a tour in the UK, British reporters uncovered a shocking truth that would explode into headlines around the world. Lewis, who was 22 at the time, had married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown. To make matters worse, he had been telling people she was 15. Still controversial, but not as outright disturbing. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Sullivan, who had publicly supported Lewis by putting him in front of millions of viewers, felt blindsided. According to a booking agent from the time, Sullivan was furious and never invited Lewis back to the show. It wasn't just disappointment, it felt personal. Sullivan believed he had unknowingly helped promote someone whose actions went completely against his own moral standards. The consequences for Lewis were devastating. Almost overnight, his career in America collapsed. Radio stations pulled his songs, concert venues canceled his shows. His pay dropped from a staggering $10,000 per night to just $250. For someone at the peak of fame, it was a fall few could recover from. Although Lewis would later rebuild his career in country music, his path as a rock and roll superstar was permanently shaken. And what made the situation even more troubling was what came to light in the years that followed. The marriage scandal, as shocking as it was, turned out to be only part of a much darker pattern. Lewis's personal life became filled with controversy. 7 marriages, accusations of misconduct, and tragedies that raised serious questions. 2 of his wives died under disturbing circumstances, including one who drowned and another who passed away from a substance overdose just weeks after their wedding. Looking back, some believe Sullivan saw something deeper early on. His decision to cut ties with Lewis wasn't just about one scandal. It was about what he sensed beneath the surface. Despite his undeniable influence on rock and roll, Lewis's life became a mix of talent and turmoil. And for Sullivan, drawing that line early became one of his strongest stands, choosing principles over popularity. Keep watching to find out other music legends Ed Sullivan hated. Number 4. The Doors. On Sunday night, September 7, 1967, the air inside the Ed Sullivan Theater was thick with tension, a mix of hairspray, cigarette smoke, and the faint scent of leather. Outside, America was in turmoil. Protests were shaking the streets, and the hippie movement was rising, challenging old norms. Inside, Ed Sullivan, with his stiff shoulders and cold demeanor, was preparing for a showdown, a confrontation he didn't realize he was about to lose. Sullivan held enormous power. A nod from him could turn an unknown band into legends. A shake of his head could bury careers forever. That night, his guests were The Doors, the wild Los Angeles band fronted by Jim Morrison, whose dark charisma and dangerous aura had already earned him a reputation. The trouble began about 15 minutes before airtime in a cramped dressing room reeking of sweat and leather. Sullivan's producer entered with an ultimatum. CBS executives were concerned about the line in the band's chart-topping hit, "Light My Fire." "Girl, we couldn't get much higher." In the context of the time, higher was interpreted as a substance reference, a scandal waiting to happen on live television, with families and children watching. "You have to change it," Bob ordered, his tone steely and final. "Instead of higher, say better. If you can't do that, pack your gear and get out." The band looked at each other, tension rippling through the room. This was the Ed Sullivan Show. A single appearance could define their careers. To refuse was to risk fame. Morrison, lounging casually with his feet on the table, looked up at the producer. His handsome face was calm, almost obedient. "Sure," he said, with a small smile. "We'll change it." The other members nodded reluctantly, trusting their leader. The producer left, convinced he had tamed the rebels. But he didn't see the glint of mischief in Morrison's eyes. At 8 p.m., the on-air light came on. Sullivan introduced The Doors with his usual solemnity. unaware of the plan brewing behind him. The band began their performance, flawlessly playing the first section of Light My Fire. They followed the rules, looking polished and obedient. In the control room, the staff relaxed, thinking the crisis had passed. Then came the crucial moment. After the organ interlude, Morrison stepped forward, eyes opening wide, and stared directly into the camera. He knew Sullivan was watching in the wings, and in a move that would become legendary, he ignored the agreed-upon lyric. With a defiant, clear, and provocative voice, he sang higher, stretching it with theatrical satisfaction. He repeated it in the final chorus, ensuring that every viewer understood. Backstage, CBS executives turned pale. Sullivan, standing in the wings, went from red-faced fury to purple rage. He realized he had been outsmarted. A young rock star, right in front of millions, had publicly pranked the most powerful man in television. When the song ended, Sullivan's customary handshake and friendly chat were replaced by perfunctory applause. He cut to a commercial immediately, refusing to approach Morrison. Once the cameras switched off, he stormed backstage. The producer blocked the band as they exited the stage. "What the hell do you think you just did?" he shouted. "We had a deal. You promised. You'll never perform here again." The Doors looked to Morrison for guidance. He remained calm, lit a cigarette, and uttered a line that would echo through rock history. "Hey, man, we just did the Sullivan Show." That night, the Doors left the theater, banned from Sullivan's show, but they walked out as heroes. Morrison had shown that self-respect and artistic integrity mattered more than a safe career, and the word higher wasn't just about substances. It was a symbol of transcending the censorship, fear, and rigid control of a fading era. The Doors had not only performed, but they had also flown higher. How far can one go for Ed Sullivan to hate him? Let's find out. Number 3. James Brown. James Brown didn't just perform. He took over every stage he stepped on. With explosive energy, razor-sharp timing, and a sound that would later define funk music, he changed the direction of American music forever. When he appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, his performances were so intense and polished that even Ed Sullivan, a man not known for handing out compliments lightly, called him the hardest-working man in show business. That nickname would follow Brown for the rest of his life. But behind the spotlight, there was another side of James Brown that many people didn't see or didn't want to talk about. To audiences at home, Brown was thrilling. His cape routines, his powerful voice, and his perfectly synchronized band created moments that felt larger than life. But backstage, stories painted a very different picture. According to those who worked around him, Brown could be intensely controlling, unpredictable, and at times frightening. One former associate, who witnessed several of his appearances, described the contrast clearly. Brown had the power to make crowds scream with excitement, but at the same time, there were people who feared him. That duality didn't sit well with Sullivan. Sullivan came from a different era of entertainment. He believed that stars, no matter how big they became, should remain respectful, professional, and grounded. In his eyes, Brown didn't fit that mold. He demanded complete control over everything around him, from his performances to the behavior of his band. Musicians working under him were often treated harshly, even fined for small mistakes like missing a step or wearing scuffed shoes. To Sullivan, that wasn't discipline. It was something deeper, something more troubling. And then there was Brown's history offstage. His legal troubles weren't isolated incidents. They stretched across years and included multiple arrests for domestic misconduct, weapons charges, and substance-related offenses. His relationships were often marked by conflict, and allegations of misconduct followed him throughout his life. One of the most disturbing aspects involved repeated accusations from women close to him. His third wife, Adrienne Lois Rodriguez, publicly accused him of violent misconduct, even filing assault charges before later reconciling with him. Her death in 1996, following cosmetic surgery, added another layer of unease to an already troubled history. Stories like these didn't go unnoticed. According to a production assistant, Sullivan once remarked privately that Brown had a kind of devil's energy in him. It wasn't said lightly. Sullivan deeply respected Brown's talent. There was no denying what he brought to the stage, but he couldn't ignore the growing number of troubling reports about his behavior. Still, Sullivan continued to book him. That's what made the situation so complicated. Brown was simply too important to ignore. His influence stretched far beyond soul and funk, eventually shaping disco and even hip-hop, where his music would be sampled for decades. From a television standpoint, he was pure gold, an artist who could captivate millions in seconds. But behind the scenes, things were different. Staff members noticed that Sullivan kept a certain distance from Brown. Unlike the warm, friendly relationships he often built with other performers, his interactions with Brown were more reserved, more cautious. It was as if he admired the artist but didn't trust the man. A music historian later described it as a quiet struggle. Sullivan found himself caught between two truths. On one hand, Brown was a musical genius whose impact couldn't be denied. On the other hand, there were serious concerns about his character that Sullivan couldn't fully accept. That tension created a strange dynamic. On camera, Sullivan praised Brown openly, celebrating his performances and his influence. But off camera, there were doubts, questions that never fully went away. Looking back, those concerns seem almost prophetic. As the years went on, more allegations, more incidents, and more legal troubles continued to surface. The pattern didn't fade. It grew stronger, confirming many of the early worries Sullivan had kept mostly to himself. In the end, James Brown's legacy remained powerful and undeniable. His music changed the world. His influence is still felt today. But for Ed Sullivan, the story was never that simple. He saw the brilliance, he felt the impact, and at the same time, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about James Brown wasn't quite right. The reason Ed Sullivan hated this next person would surprise you. Keep watching to find out more. Number 2. Elvis Presley. In the mid-1950s, Ed Sullivan made a bold and very public promise that Elvis Presley would never appear on his show. Not now, not ever. This wasn't just a casual opinion. Sullivan was genuinely disturbed by what he saw. After watching Elvis perform Hound Dog on Milton Berle's program in June 1956, Sullivan was shocked. The hip movements, the energy, the way Elvis carried himself on stage, it all felt too much, too suggestive, too far from what Sullivan believed belonged in American living rooms. He didn't hold back either. Reports at the time quoted him calling Elvis's performance vulgar and unfit for family audiences. In Sullivan's mind, this wasn't entertainment. It was a threat to standards. But while Sullivan was drawing his line, America had already made up its mind. They loved Elvis. Just a month later, when Elvis appeared on Steve Allen's show, the ratings told the whole story. Millions tuned in. The numbers didn't just beat Sullivan's, they crushed them. What Sullivan saw as inappropriate, the public saw as exciting, new, and impossible to ignore. Suddenly, this wasn't just about values anymore, it was about survival. Behind the scenes, Sullivan's producer, Marlo Lewis, laid it out clearly. They couldn't afford to keep Elvis off the show, not if they wanted to stay on top. For a man like Sullivan, who took pride in leading the ratings race, this created a serious conflict. Stick to his principles and lose viewers, or give in and book someone he couldn't stand. In the end, the decision was made. Sullivan folded. In a move that shocked many, Elvis was offered $50,000 for 3 appearances, the highest fee the show had ever paid at the time. It was a clear sign that despite everything he had said, Sullivan needed Elvis more than he was willing to admit. But even as he gave in, Sullivan tried to keep control. He set strict conditions. Cameras would only film Elvis from the waist up during his more energetic performances. The famous hip movements that caused so much controversy would be kept out of view. If Elvis was going to appear, it would be on Sullivan's terms. When Elvis finally made his debut on September 9, 1956, the result was historic. Around 60 million people tuned in, over 80% of the television audience. It was one of the biggest moments in TV history. Ironically, Sullivan wasn't even there. He was recovering from a car accident, so actor Charles Lawton stepped in to host the show. In a strange way, it may have made things easier. There was no awkward tension backstage, no cold stares, just Elvis and an audience ready to watch. By the time Elvis returned for his third appearance in January 1957, something unexpected happened. Sullivan softened, at least on the surface. After Elvis finished performing, Sullivan addressed the audience and called him a real, decent, fine boy. It sounded like approval, like acceptance. But behind the scenes, the truth was different. Sullivan's personal feelings hadn't really changed. He still saw Elvis as everything he disliked about the direction entertainment was heading. The style, the influence on young people, the shift away from traditional values, it all continued to bother him. Elvis, in Sullivan's eyes, wasn't a star he admired. He was a necessity, a ratings machine that couldn't be ignored. And that reality came at a cost. For someone used to shaping public taste, being forced to adapt, to accept something he had openly rejected, wasn't easy. It felt like a loss of control, a quiet defeat played out in front of millions. Elvis hadn't just made it onto Sullivan's stage, he had forced his way there. And in doing so, he proved something Sullivan didn't want to admit, that the audience, not the host, ultimately decided what mattered. And that was something Sullivan never fully forgave. Who else made it to Ed Sullivan's hate list? Keep watching to find out. Number 1. Buddy Holly. By January 1958, Buddy Holly was already emerging as one of rock and roll's brightest new stars. At just 21, his hiccuping vocal style, thick-rimmed glasses, and unforgettable hits like Peggy Sue and That'll Be the Day made him instantly recognizable. He carried the fresh, innovative energy of early rock, representing a generation eager to challenge the old norms. When Holly and his band, the Crickets, were invited to perform on The Ed Sullivan Show, it should have been the moment that launched him even further into stardom. Instead, it became a clash that would leave lasting tension between Holly and television's most powerful tastemaker. The trouble started during rehearsals. Holly planned to perform his latest hit, Oh Boy, an upbeat rock number that had teenagers dancing in bedrooms across the country. Sullivan, however, immediately objected. The lyrics, all of my love, all of my kissing, you don't know what you've been missing, were, in his eyes, too suggestive. As a conservative Catholic determined to keep his show family-friendly, Sullivan demanded that Holly pick a less provocative song from his repertoire. Holly's response stunned everyone. I told your people what songs we were going to do. We're doing Oh Boy, he said. For a young artist, to directly challenge Sullivan was almost unheard of. Most performers, especially at the start of their careers, would have complied without question to avoid jeopardizing their national exposure. But Buddy Holly wasn't like most artists. Calm, confident, and quietly self-assured, he refused to bend. Sullivan, accustomed to complete control, was furious. Witnesses reported his face reddened, his posture stiffened, and his demeanor became icy. From that moment, the tension backstage was palpable. As showtime approached, Sullivan's treatment of Holly grew increasingly cold. He deliberately mispronounced his name during rehearsals, calling him Buddy Holette, despite repeated corrections, and introduced the Crickets on air with a lifeless, unenthusiastic tone that barely acknowledged their talent. Some accounts even suggest he instructed sound engineers to lower Holly's microphone volume during the performance, a petty attempt to sabotage the song he had tried to block. Despite the obstacles, Holly delivered a spirited performance of Oh Boy on January 26, 1958. Though hampered by technical issues and Sullivan's subtle sabotage, Holly's charisma and the song's infectious energy still captivated both the studio audience and viewers at home. After the performance, Sullivan's disdain was unmistakable. A half-hearted handshake and curt dismissal replaced any form of praise. No invitation for a return appearance was offered, a rare omission for an artist of Holly's caliber. In 1958, crossing Ed Sullivan could have serious consequences for a career. Holly's decision to stand up to television's most powerful gatekeeper was a bold statement about artistic independence and foreshadowed the shifting dynamics of American entertainment. A new generation of performers was emerging, one that valued creativity and personal expression over established approval. Tragically, Holly would have little time to enjoy the impact of his rebellion. Just over a year later, on February 3, 1959, he died in a plane crash at only 22 years old, a moment immortalized as the day the music died. Yet, even in his brief encounter with Sullivan, Holly left a lasting mark. His refusal to compromise on Oh Boy symbolized the tension between rock's rebellious spirit and television's old guard, a clash that would continue to define the evolution of popular music for years to come. What are your thoughts about Ed Sullivan's reasons for hating these music legends? Let us know in the comments section below. In the end, this isn't just about hits or headlines. It's about the lives, choices, and struggles behind the music. From Barry to Holly, fame clashed with Sullivan's rules, showing that even legends had flaws. If you enjoyed this look behind the stage, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more untold stories.